What can happen to a doctor if he alters his medical records in a medical malpractice lawsuit? You want to know the answer? Come join me on this walk through the neighborhood as I share with you the answer to that question. Hi, I'm Gerry Oginski. I'm a New York medical malpractice and personal injury attorney. Alright, so let's say you decide to bring a lawsuit against your doctor claiming that he was careless and that his carelessness caused you significant harm and injury. And now your doctor denies all of your allegations. Well, that means that your case is going to go the distance. So, during the course of your lawsuit, we ask for copies of your doctor's medical records. Actually, I should go back for a moment. Before we actually go ahead and confirm that you have a valid basis for a case, we are required to get your doctor's medical records, review them, and then send them off to a qualified medical expert so that he can confirm whether or not your doctor did in fact violate the basic standards of medical care, causing you significant harm and injury. If our medical expert does in fact confirm that you have a valid basis for a case, then and only then are we permitted to go ahead and file a lawsuit on your behalf. What happens if during the course of the lawsuit we now learn that the doctor has somehow altered or changed or manipulated your medical records? You want to know what can happen? If we are able to show that the doctor did in fact alter your medical records, and I'm not talking about putting a point at the end of a sentence or a comma here, I'm talking about materially altering your records to indicate that something else was done instead of what was really done, the doctor could lose his license to practice medicine. It's that simple. But being able to prove it is not always that easy. Why isn't it always easy to prove? Because many times we only have one copy of the doctor's records. And sometimes we actually have to look at the original records to see if there is any evidence that the doctor altered his records. Another instance might be where the patient decides to go to another doctor, and in that instance asks the office for a copy of her own records. Now she takes a copy of the records and goes to doctor number 2. Shortly after that, we wind up bringing a lawsuit. And during the course of your lawsuit, we now ask the doctor's attorney for a copy of the records, of your records, and now he gives us copies of the records that are different, materially different than the records that you had obtained and brought to doctor number 2. In that instance, we now have 2 different sets of records. Let me share with you an instance where I was able to show that there were 2 different sets of medical records in this particular malpractice case. I was asked to do a deposition to question a doctor in a medical malpractice case. And the records that they had obtained was shortly within a few days after the patient had last seen the doctor. And now I was using those records to go ahead and evaluate this particular case, and it was based on those records that their medical expert had in fact confirmed that there was a valid basis for a case. Okay, so now before I started questioning the doctor, I asked his attorney to see a copy of the doctor's original records, or to see the original records. And now I start going through those original records. And what do you think I see? I see that the notations for those particular days are markedly different than the records that we had. So I didn't say a word. I simply handed those records back to the doctor's attorney, and now I began to question the doctor. And during my questioning of the doctor, I used the doctor's records that he provided. And what I was doing was locking him into his testimony about the records that he had produced during this question and answer session known as a deposition. So now at the very end of the deposition, I pull out my records, the ones that were in our file. And I said, "Doctor, is this in your handwriting?" "Yes, it is." "And do you know where copies of these records are, or the originals?" "No, I don't." "This is your handwriting, correct? Nobody else made it?" "Yes." "Can you explain to me why these records are markedly different than the records you just showed me for the same exact day?" And you should have seen the deer in the headlights look that this doctor had. Needless to say, even though I didn't think much of this case to begin with when I was preparing this case to question the doctor, after I learned that he had altered the records, now they were eager to try and resolve this case quickly. Why? Because they didn't want to get in front of a jury, or didn't want this to progress any further, because there's a good chance that the doctor could have lost his license. So why do I share this quick information with you? I share it with you just to give you a quick insight and an understanding into what can happen if a doctor chooses to alter your medical records during the course of a lawsuit or in anticipation of a lawsuit. You know, I realize you're likely watching this video because you have questions or concerns about your own matter. Well, if your matter did happen in New York and you have not yet started a lawsuit, but are thinking of doing so, what I invite you to do is pick up the phone and call me. You know I answer questions like yours every single day, and I'd love to talk to you. You can reach me at 516-487-8207 or by email at Gerry, Gerry, at Oginski-law.com. That's it for today's video. I'm Gerry Oginski. Have a wonderful day.